Alright, should be making a video, draft physics and such. Yes. So, Hythloday again. So again, no matter how much I plead to have a conversation that's bounded in some sort of real conversation, and this is ironically with Hythloday, who complained about Piro being a phony. And this is just such a phony conversation. He's just doing this devil advocate crap. I want to understand why he looks at this evidence and says, oh yes, I can only see it this way. This way is 100 times more sensible than this explanation. So he's basically arguing as if he thinks their explanation is 100 times. I mean, mine is mountains away from being as tall and as magnificent as their great explanation and their great evidence. I don't want to understand how he sees it that way, because I couldn't see it anywhere close to that even before I knew the details. So even before I heard the details, I got the details about what their theories were and how garbage the evidence is. It already looked like garbage evidence. It's so thin and so weak. And so it's just an amazingly dishonest conversation. So I don't see any much function in it. But anyway, I'll respond to his inevitable nitpicks, implying that somehow his misunderstanding is my fault. I didn't say something clear enough. Which is just, again, just more of just garbage rhetoric. So I wanted to play his video first and then do a response, but I get a minute and a half in and I just can't. It's insufferable. Garbage. So anyway, let's play along.
I think this will be a very short video, which will be good for all.
It'd be nice if you made a longer video and you answered my questions. What does quantum mechanics say? Do individual photons interfere with it themselves, or do photons interfere with each other? And what's the rules for how I can make this interference happen? What are they, special magical rules? You have to click your heels together, go no place like home? I mean, what's the special rule where, different photons can interfere with each other and then only single photons can interfere with their wave function? What's the special rules? Why don't you answer some of my questions?
DraftScience on Stern-Gerlach experiment. From what I gather, the explanation that the silver atom is made to Elise.
Yes, I pointed out that it's silver, which means it's a conductor, and I pointed out that, well, Lenz's law probably applies, and what's really happening is the silver atom, as it gets close to one pole, it polarizes. That means the force hits it, it expands, it becomes the same polarization as the thing, the energy it's getting exposed to, and in doing that it becomes repulsive, it shoots the other way because it's repulsive, and then it runs into this different field that's much weaker. Alright, so it can go quite a distance before it realizes, oh, I'm getting changed. I'm getting, all my red energy is now turned into blue energy, or however you want to look at it. I'm getting exposed to the opposite pole, so I'm shrinking now. So now I'm becoming the same as those atoms. And now when I become the same, I become repulsive again, then I shoot back up to the top. So yes, there, I gave you an explanation. I drew you a picture of it. A perfectly rational explanation indicating that silver, I pointed out, it's paramagnetic. I pointed out Lenz's law applies. I pointed out an uneven magnetic field will allow there to be a very imbalanced reaction. So yes, it's going to get herky-jerky. Perfectly understandable, perfectly reasonable explanation.
I'll have to look up that word. I think it's deflect.
Well, I mean, I don't know what the word is. Actually, nobody ever says it, but it's sort of an important thing. Okay, I mean, you see it all over the place. My images will be pixelated, and they'll have Elise lines around them. And fonts, everybody knows about fonts and how ugly they used to be with all the little jerky lines. So, I mean, it's a concept that's been around a while. I don't think it should confuse anybody.
as it progresses through the apparatus, that is only an explanation. In fact, it yields a prediction of a spread of the beam.
So again, just a nonsense statement. So here, let's go to the, I got the old drawing right here, and I'll try to see where the fuck that prediction is, because it's not anywhere in the drawing I drew. Shit.
But not necessarily a confinement to two spots. How would it be guaranteed to produce the dichotomy of a beam split?
The dichotomy. It's really not the dichotomy. It's a 50-50 chance that the thing is either going up or it's going down, and it's always going to be going up or down at about the same angle if the atoms are moving at about the same speed. And so I'll just show you the drawing. I mean, what else can I do? Just have to do it over and over again. Let's just keep showing the same stuff over and over again, because nobody can pay any damn attention. So I got to keep saying it over and over and over. So I mean, this is what I drew. All right. I mean, the silver atom charges. I drew the little red mark here indicating it goes, positive here, and then it goes negative up here, and it goes positive when it moves down here. And so it's going to move at a kind of a consistent rate. And since the atoms are likely semi-consistent in their makeup, these lines are going to be semi-similar. There's not going to be much difference between atom and atom. They're going to move because their momentum will be about the same, so they'll all be within a range. And that range, and it's proven by the experiment, in the sense that the stronger you make the field, okay, the more regular these spots get. And the more irregular they get, like they do a little bit of a figure 8 thing, little drops, like little drops. They get a drop shape to them if the field is weak, which would indicate that then the Lysing is going to be a bit inconsistent, because the amount of magnetism is inconsistent. But clearly, okay, there's no Lysing at some other frequency than the frequency of the atomic weight of the atoms and the strength of the magnetic field, and all the atoms are going to be in that thing. So unless you want to say that the atoms are hugely divergent in size, like you have a clump that's 100 atoms and then you have a clump that's just 1 atom, and so you have huge velocity differences and mass differences, there's absolutely no reason for anything to come out as there's certainly no reason for anything to ever come out straight. All right, so the Lysing means that it has an ejection point. Where was it when it reached the end? So the only difference, they'll be out of phase. That is, some of them be going up here, some go up here, some go up here, then they go down, 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 down here. So they'll all have a different phase. And so the phase is going to decide, well, if the end of the experiment is right here, this is where the experiment ends, the magnetic field stops, the last thing they were, if they were negative, positive down here, they were charged positive, well then they're heading this way and they'll just keep going that way and land there. If they were on their way down because they were positive and they got repelled as their last act, then they're going to be on their way into here and they're going to hit over here. There's not going to be any hitting this way straight. There's no reason for one to go straight when it comes out of the experiment either going up or going down. It's going to come out of the experiment either going down or going up. Those are the two choices it has. It doesn't have this. None of the atoms are doing this straight thing anymore. They're either going up or they're going down. I made that clear. The drawing was clear. And because he can't pay attention, he implies that there's some flaw in my explanation. Well, no, there's a flaw in your understanding.
Rather than merely just the spread. That's lacking in the DraftScience explanation.
So again, it wasn't lacking in the explanation. It wasn't lacking in the drawing. The whole point of me explaining the experiment, I drew... I'll go back to the drawing for a second. I mean, it's just so dishonest. I mean, the whole point of me drawing it was to illustrate exactly this point. I guess I have to go this way. So look over here to the drawing where I drew the patterns. All right, and I was saying, okay, so when there's no magnet on, the the stuff probably does just diverge and spread, because they're not using a laser beam to shoot the atoms. So the atoms are probably coming out diverging, so they just kind of spread through the experiment, leak out the other side. I don't know. We don't have the experiment, do we? No one's done it and shown us the pattern, have they? No. So that's what one assumes. And then I showed the middle. Okay, so here's what it does when you have the power halfway on, 50% power. Okay, you get something like this. And then full power, you get something like this. So again, there's nothing lacking about me explaining the phenomenon and explaining why there's a separation. It's just so unfair. Again, he doesn't apply any of this nitpick scrutiny to a damn thing they say. They can say the wackiest, craziest crap, and none of this scrutiny is ever applied. No fact-checking, no, I didn't understand you, no anything. They just eat it right up. And LIGO can say anything they want to say. I wonder if you ever saw the movie Interstellar. You want to point out to me in that movie Interstellar where there was one moment where they described gravity accurately? One single accurate portrayal of the most basic friggin' physical function in physics? It is such a piece of steaming crap.
Furthermore, I didn't follow the explanation. I actually like the analogy of rowing, people on seats rowing in directions. For a long time, when DraftScience spoke about a certain number of...
Shouldn't change the subjects, it's just so dangerous.
Fundamental particles, going this way and a lesser number going that way, I could only envisage disintegration of the thing that is said to be a body, a particle. But if it's termed as thought of as contributing in that direction, or contributing in this direction.
So again, he's blaming me for his inability to understand a school of fish. I mean, I think the school of fish analogy, the one I started with 7 years ago, was really good at just pointing out that stuff goes in, the school's going to be changed by the stuff that went in, and fish can leave the school, and that's going to change the school. So the school is defined by which fish go in and stay, and which fish leave. And that's going to define which way the school goes, as a school.
In the row analogy of genuinely taking your seats there, then that's fine. So this leasing, for me to understand it in the DraftScience paradigm seems.
All right, so this is okay. So here's another way to understand it. If I take this is a Professor Lewin, I think it was actually one of Professor Lewin's videos. All right, so you have two charged plates, and you take a ping pong ball, right? And you can get and paint it metal, so it'll charge. And you can get it to bounce from one plate, go to the other plate, bounce back, and then you can put it inside and get it to bounce back and forth. It's a leasing between the two plates. It's bouncing back and forth between the two plates. That's what it's going to do, because it charges, and then as soon as it charges, it becomes the same charge, and that's repulsive, so it jumps to the other side. Then when it hits the other, because it overshoots again, it overshoots the force and actually hits the other side, then charges opposite again, then becomes repulsive again, then jumps back the other way. So the actual atom doesn't have to actually hit the magnetic surfaces to gain its charge. It gains its charge from just the force itself. You radiate it, it becomes radioactive. That's why I use the word mirror. It becomes a mirror to what happens. What's coming at it, it becomes.
To require an explanation in terms of rowers getting in and out of the boat, so to speak. And I don't think DraftScience did that.
So again, I had no clue that you wanted me to also explain the momentum of the atom, why when it's charged the same it moves. I mean, I already did all those details in other videos, so I don't know, that applies to every single charge phenomenon that exists, every single magnetic phenomenon. You obviously have to understand that the only reason why something moves is because yes, it's obviously there's force moving it. There's rowers jumping in and out of boats. I mean, amazing nitpick.
In regards to quantum lock, similarly, I'm looking for an explanation.
Oh, similarly.
Of the principles that we've agreed upon influencing the system. So I did a search on DraftScience channel first to see if I could find it, but he talks heavily about Lenz's law. And, well, I know about Lenz's law from the classical perspective, but I couldn't find a video explaining Lenz's law as I might understand it.
Why do you have to understand it beyond understanding it as an effect? They don't understand it as a cause. Again, they're just making up these arrows, just like they have arrows coming out of the magnet and think there's somehow something goes out one end and it goes in another end. They have the implication that that's a truth. When I've already detailed how that can't possibly be right, and I've explained how Maxwell's equations basically describe radiation like the sun radiates light. Okay, they're rays of force. There's nothing's going around the magnet. All right, it's just a change in the amount of the density of the two forces, the plus and the minus in the equations. There's either more plus force or there's either more minus force. Oh, amazing crap. So, I mean, there's just nothing to say to this. I mean, I'm just pointing out how, obviously if you have a superconductor, you've gotten rid of any retardation in the reaction time. So it's like even if you super cooled a transformer, you could sort of imagine that you get rid of all the extra eddy currents, you get rid of all the garbage, and that you have a much more efficient transfer of the energy from one coil to the other coil. And that's all that's really happening in superconductive levitation, is you're just creating a perfect mirror. So now wherever you put the object, all right, you have a perfect mirror to its position, and the amount of force it's throwing is exactly what it's going to get back, compensating for gravity. It's going to be perfectly anti-gravitational, and since the gravity is the only thing moving the object's not getting moved by any other force than gravity. It's not a swinging magnet into another magnet. You're just letting gravity do the moving, and it's stopping. And if I did it with a superconductor material and I did it with the swinging thing, you'd get the same effect. It would swing and stop and stay in one position.
In terms of exchange of particles and rowers getting in boats, and so forth. So again, I'm looking for an explanation of quantum lock in terms of rowers getting in boats.
So you're just talking about, you want every single time I ever talk about an atom moving, I have to explain to you how the electrons are banging into each other. The force hits the electrons are pressurized, that is, the atom is compressed, which means now the electrons are becoming, whatever the right word would be. No, they're expanding. Sorry. It's the expansion of the electrons makes the electrons more dominant. So that's all you're talking about, is contracting and expanding atoms. If you just accept that that notion isn't too far from something you can imagine as being reasonable. Yeah, the atom gets a little fatter, it gets a little thinner, and that's going to decide whether it's a plus or a minus field that it's creating overall, that it's got a little bit more of a bias towards the red end or to the blue end, depending on whether it's fat or small. I mean, that's too hard for you to figure out, and that every one of the electrons is constantly being hit by whatever the field is that's around it. That's the whole reason why the electrons move, is because, okay, they're constantly getting hit by fields created by their environment, and they become a mirror to that field. The atoms become a mirror to the field that's hitting them. Well, how is that so hard to figure out? And again, I have to explain that every single time I talk about any circumstance where something moves. I have to re-explain the function of force on electrons and protons. I thought you understood the momentum argument. Just apply the momentum argument and just recognize that that's what's the difference. The force is a difference. What's the difference between the pointed magnet at the top and the ball magnet at the bottom? Oh, well, the difference is one's negative and one's positive. It's exactly the opposite force. That's what's different. One's an electron force and one's a proton force. One's going to push electrons, one's going to push protons.
In terms of what the fundamental principles that DraftScience has elucidated.
I mean, this is, I don't know what the word for this is. This is just when you just have an endless excuse making. It just doesn't matter. Again, it doesn't matter how many frickin' fingerprints I find. I can find all the bloody gloves. I can find their cut. I can have videos of their cut fingers. I can have video of them with the Bruno Mollies on. It just doesn't matter how much evidence I compile about how rubbish their theories are. He's just going to keep making these excuses. No, give me more detail. They have to give me nothing. No details at all. He doesn't want a single detail from them. No, please, no more for more information. And all he wants me to do is give him every explicit, to the tiniest little boat rower detail. They don't have boats. They don't even have an ocean. They have nothing. Nothing. And look at what this idiot's doing.
Too much of the vocabulary of fields and field pressures and such is to the orthodoxly trained mind interferes with the explanation of the fundamental fact.
Oh, I have to go back. What the hell this
field
crap
pressures
is?
and
I avoid the word field. All right, I never use it. I'm always saying field of what? I'm saying there is no field if there is no force. Okay, so there's no force, there's no field. If it's not got soldiers, if you don't got soldiers on your battlefield, you don't have a field.
Too much of the vocabulary of fields and field pressures and such is to the orthodoxly trained mind interferes with the explanation of the fundamental facts about rowers getting in and out of boats, and makes it difficult to follow.
So again, is this my fault? So he's saying somehow because they have invented fake fields and fake notions of effects, spooky action at a distance all over the frickin' place, somehow that makes my argument broken. No, that makes their argument broken. I mean, he just can't help but blame me for everything that's wrong in the universe. Every wrong statement made by any other human being, he's somehow going to blame it on me. They're not at fault. No, I did it wrong. I said it wrong. No, they did. Bullshit.
That's why I advocate distinct language as far as possible to articulate.
Yeah, you can't fix some of the language. Again, like the word photon, for example, right? I mean, they decided to call it a photon when it was a ray. Okay, a ray is a photon. Oh, that's probably not going to work. They use the word polarization to describe the poles on a magnet. And then they use the word polarization to describe the effect of light going through filters and shit. Who's supposed to fix it? So the dissidents have to somehow invent new language, and then they're going to get, oh, what are you making up that wacky word for? A quanton, and they'll make fun of it. So how do we fix this, idiot? And again, is it our fault? They've decided to use the same frickin' words for different things. A vector, well, a vector could be a pointing vector, or it could be a magical 5-dimensional thought vector. It doesn't really point anywhere, but they're going to call it a vector anyway.
The principles of draft science to distinguish them more readily from orthodox science. So yeah, that's about it, I think.
Won't be it.
As for lensing, the hypothesis that these two images are of the same origin but are spatially separated, well, it would, to be plausible, well, it would be an explanation, but you could quantitatively investigate that explanation by
oh, right. I should do all of that. I should quantitatively investigate. They don't have to investigate anything. They can just show you these stupid pictures and pretend it makes some sort of sense. So let's point out again. So this is what he's defending. So he's saying this is so solid that I shouldn't even mess with it. I shouldn't even try to defeat this brilliance. So let's first off understand the gravity lens has nothing to do with being a lens capable of collecting energy over a great period of space and bending it into a focus like a telescope. Okay, first off, it's the wrong shaped lens. All right, so let's go back to step A. And let's understand some basic, this is just basic physics, okay? I mean, again, this could all be understood by a bunch of 6th graders. If I said this to a 6th grader, he'd say, oh yeah, I get that. Okay, these regular lenses work by the angle. So the angle, the sharpest angle does the most bending. So with a regular lens on a telescope, right, you have a lot of bending on the outside, okay, where you're collecting the light, where you're magnifying it by collecting it as it diverges. Right, so that's how it functions as a magnifier. Well, the gravity lens looks exactly the opposite. Okay, the gravity is really strong in the middle, so any light going straight gets hugely bent, and any light coming at an angle, nothing happens. Well, it doesn't even do that. It doesn't bend at all. It just goes dead straight. So it won't collect light. It won't magnify anything at a distance. It can only magnify something in here, really close. And so it's not even the right lens. So just understand that, okay? Now, all of these galactic images have some kind of notion like this. There's a cluster of crap, and then they have a little blob over here and a little blob over here that seem related. Okay, they never have a perfect Einstein ring in any of the galactic images. Those are only the images from like 12 billion light years away. Do they have something that might look like an Einstein, a real ring? But it's so fuzzy and then it's not even centered, right? He'll be the object, and the ring will be like this, you know, lopsided, which doesn't even obey spherical symmetry, right? And so the whole idea is that you understand the sun is a sphere, almost really close to a really good sphere, and its gravity is perfectly spherical. But a cluster doesn't do that. The galaxy cluster doesn't create spherical gravity. There is no even gravity from side to side. It's completely affected by the individual fields being created by the individual objects. So in places like this, for example, no gravity. No gravity. Okay, like in here, no gravity. These are places like, you know, I don't know what the distance would be from like Jupiter to the sun. There's some location between Jupiter and the sun where the gravity is zero. The two bodies are pulling even, and there's zero gravity there. Zero. No bending would happen at all. All right. So a cluster can't create spherical gravity in the first place. It'd be incredibly clumpy gravity, insanely lumpy, very strong, very weak in all kinds of weird ways. So you'd never get arcs like this. You'd never get arcs in two locations. It would be, the probability would be insane to have any similar arcs from two opposite sides of a cluster. So their theory is broken. I mean, I've been through this. I can go through point after point after point after point about how their theory doesn't work. Just like I've done with the interferometer and the beam splitter and the two-slit experiment. Doesn't matter. I point out how theoretically they can't possibly be right. It's not possible theoretically. The lens is the wrong shape. The distances are preposterously insane from the gravitational body. There can't possibly be light bending there. It's way too far away from anything that has gravity. The whole thing makes absolutely no sense, and this motherfucker just keeps sitting there making excuses for it. Telling me that he rationally can't see what I'm saying here. I can't understand what you're saying. What do you mean the lens is backwards? You can't figure that out? They can't figure it out. What do you mean the cluster doesn't create symmetrical gravity? Well, because it's not symmetrical. The mass is not it has no symmetry. It's like heavier, more pressure in the center, more density in the center, less and less density as you go out. It's not symmetrical. And it's so diluted by tons and tons of empty space that it couldn't I don't even know how to say this. The place they think the light is being bent has so little gravity, it's 0.00000 to like the 29th power meters per second. So 10 times 20 minus 27, okay, meters per second gravity. The gravity is so weak, I could hold this pen up, and this pen would have more gravity than that. The locations they're pointing to in space and saying there's bending happening there. This pen is producing more gravity than the space there would have. And this asshole, this fucking lunatic, keeps defending this crap. It's just so nonsensical. And in the environment where we know that, yes, we've done a ton of experiments now, and we know that we can't bend any other force. No other force is bendable. Light, the magical photon, is the only thing we can't bend. We can't even bend other photons, you know, as far as I know, certain ones anyway. We have no evidence they bend. Let me think. I mean, certainly radio waves, they say, have been bent, but that's scatter, so they're playing a game there. They're not imaging radio. So all they're getting back is a little bit of the signal, and scatter will always give you back a little bit of the signal. You'll get a little bit from everywhere. Oh, it's just so bad.
Supposing what is the distance between those two entities? What's the distance from us to them, estimated? What is the distance between them? And check.
Again, this is something they don't even have good science for. You're going to get into this whole candle argument. But another thing that's just so obvious, so another point to make, is because the gravity is backwards, you know, that is, it's getting stronger as you go in. That means more bending. It means you could never image a large object. You could only image a tiny shred, because as soon as you're doing a larger object, the deflection rate is too high and you'll never come to a focus. So we would never see more than just one of the bands, so to speak, of the object. And clearly the lensing images have definable, you can see them. There's definable stars or clumps in them. You can see the little clumps of light, the little blips at a distance. So they clearly have a huge texture, and that could be 50,000 light years. That could be a huge distance. And there's no way that this broken lens could possibly create the correct image. It can't send it to us. It can't focus it to us. It's impossible for the light to do that. There's no theory that makes it possible for you to create a resolvable image that has any thickness. All you're supposed to get is one little line, one little blip of an Einstein ring. So this is just such a fraud. And again, there's no evidence of all the other stuff you should see. The blobs getting, you know, one sun getting hugely magnified. We see none of that. Wow, it's just so bad. He just keeps making excuses.
What velocity they would have to be separating at, and do some rough mathematics to confirm that it is a plausible hypothesis.
Oh, right. So I should do all of this study to figure out how to do cosmic estimations, when again they can't even do them. They're kind of clueless on this standard candle thing. Do you really believe their standard candle of even a supernova? You know, I mean, oh yeah, they always supernova at exactly the same mass. Do you really think that happens? And they exploded it with exactly the same intensity, as if they have exactly the same minerals in them, and exactly the same amount of hydrogen left, and exactly the same. No, come on. It's such a pile of crap. They have no clue how actually far away any of this shit is. I mean, with any, you know, They just don't. I mean, the redshift is kind of an interesting thing, because if that actually is telling them something, that could be pretty reliable. But as I pointed out, all of the lensed images that I've seen, the thing getting lensed is obviously not quite doesn't look quite the same as the thing they say is doing the lensing. So I would guess it's not in the same location. It's either much closer or it's further away.
And the idea that the spectra being the same is evidence, is that it supports the prediction.
Again, it means nothing, because there's a lot of explanations that would have them being the same. So again, how else do you get two things with the same kind of archy appearance on two ends of something? Like I said, an explosion perfectly explains that. We all seen smoke rings. We've all seen how explosions sort of radiate out from the explosion. It's no big surprise there would be rings of material of the same density, the same distance apart. So this is just such bullshit. Both theories predict that. And obviously their theory you can't resolve the paradoxes of it's the wrong lens. It shouldn't be able to resolve all of those little stars in there.
Whether it's enough evidence to buy into space-time.
No, that's not the issue. We're just talking about one thing. We're talking about whether photons are bent by gravity. We don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck about this being space-time or relativity. I just care about why you assholes think this is good enough evidence to conclude that the only single force in the universe that's bent is apparently these magical photons. Even though they're not bent by any other force, even really strong ones like magnetism.
And general relativity is, as a concrete thing, is another question. But the fact...
the fact that even if photons were bent by gravity, the fact that you crazy people think that proves there's a time dimension, I can't for the life of me figure out how you think that's proof there's a time dimension.
It is evidence which supports the theory. It doesn't detract from the theory.
I don't think it supports any part of the theory. I think it's a brain fart of Einstein's to even play with this in the first place. It's stupid.
And that's all scientists are normally looking for. An observation will either be in confirmation or in disagreement with the theory. The idea generally being that when you find an observation that's in disagreement, then the theory is failing. There are rare occasions.
Oh, again, this is just such horseshit, you know, to be preaching this fucking standard, like you have some sort of fair cop standards here again. There's no application of any reasoning at all. They've done no introspection. They have taken no details here. They have taken no caution. They've jumped to the wildest conclusions possible on the thinnest amounts of evidence. They haven't even figured out that the lens is the wrong frickin' shape. That's how little care they've taken.
That have been noted where the observation has been flawed and the theoretician was right to say no, they'll revise that, they'll find that the theory is right, not the observation. But I suspect...
Yeah, go ahead. Do that.
The idea of a singular impulse parting two bodies is difficult to put meat on. Yeah,
Oh yeah, an explosion blowing pieces away from a center point is hard to put meat on. Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, realistically, if I was to blow up a galaxy, right, to be a little bit of a terrorist, and I snuck into the middle of a galaxy and I blew up a big dark hunk of mass, let's say, it won't have to be a black hole, let's just call it a big heavy thing. Okay, and I blew the big heavy thing up, right? It's a 10,000 solar masses, and I blow it the fuck up like a supernova. Yeah, maybe you could imagine that, oh yeah, that might knock all that crap all over the place.
Things, supernovas and such, things that explode tend to emanate their energy in a circular, spherical fashion.
And that's exactly what every single one of these lensing images looks like. There's a punk over here and a little piece over here, a little piece over here, a little piece over here. Why don't you show me the lensing image where there's no symmetry in the sense of any right to left or up down symmetry to it? Go ahead and show me that one. And again, it's the wrong shaped lens, and these lensing images are supposed to be around clumps of matter that have no spherical field. They don't do that. You can't, if I take the moon and the earth and well just imagine Mars, Saturn, Mars, the earth, and Venus. You can understand that if I was to draw a circle around them where their center of mass would be, that's not how the gravitational field will look at all. That's not the field that they'll create at all. They're going to create an insanely lumpy and weird looking field because the mass is full of empty space. It's not been condensed. It has to be reduced to a spherical mass to create spherical gravity. So again, their theory, it can't be theoretically, it's impossible what they're claiming. It's theoretically not possible. And you're still defending it.
Not blow apart in two distinct pieces.
Says you. So again, we're talking about a big giant universe, and we're talking about not a huge number of these things. So clearly they don't happen too often. Whatever it was that does this. So it's not exactly something that's, oh, no, I can't possibly imagine that every once in a while the explosion happens just the right way. Well, let's say that happens on, say, the galaxy is a plane like this, and the black hole's a little lower over here, and the explosion happens more towards the bottom, and it blows these two pieces up this way, and they're both coming at us instead of, going sideways. They're actually moving towards us and away from us, which would give them blue shift. Oh, please. You can't imagine that could be an explanation. But you can imagine the inverted lens, the backward lens collecting light, magnifying objects billions of light years away with the wrong shaped lens.
So, yeah, we'll call that a video.
I'll call it a piece of shit. So again, he's just sitting here devil advocating for the bad guys. The weak, lazy science. It's terrible science that's been done over the last 100 years. Just horrible, tiny little fragments. They invent entanglements. They invent all kinds of wacky crap on the thinnest little pieces of evidence. And again, he just keeps saying somehow it's not thin, crappy evidence when it just reeks of being thin, crappy evidence. None of this is compelling evidence. None of it makes any sense. It's totally inconsistent with their own theories. One minute the photon's interfering with itself. The next minute it's interfering with anybody who's fucking around. I mean, it's just such bullshit. And he's just sitting there fucking defending it because why? Because he hates me. Period. There's no other reason. Okay, if this theory came out of Feynman's mouth, he'd be eating it up. He'd be saying, oh, that Feynman is so fucking brilliant. Look at how he figured it all out. If Einstein had, gotten a hold of these papers, okay, he would say, oh, okay, Einstein finally did it. He won the day. Oh, this is just disgusting. So anyway. It's just, again, it's such a dishonest. I want to know why you think their crappy evidence is compelling. Why do you find it compelling? Again, I can't understand it. As a grade school kid, I couldn't make any sense of, oh, the photon's doing this, oh, yeah, it's doing this, and two make-believe fields of nothing. Oh, yeah, space is bent, and the bending is what's causing things to move. It just rolls down the hills because gravity pushes it. I mean, how do you fall for this crap? I hope when I was drawing, I had the drawing thing on. No, I drew clumps of gravity. I'll just real quick. See, I drew things that are all clumped together. That won't create spherical gravity. So you won't have any kind of symmetry from side to side because there's going to be more gravity on one side than there is on the other side. Blah 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 blah. And be lots of gaps and lots of places where there's no gravity. So it can't possibly work. And the only lens that collects light and magnifies it is this shaped lens. This shaped lens ain't gonna do that. This shaped lens is for magnifying things really close. Alright. So, anyway. Yeah, there's nothing I can say. Human beings are just so, so pathetically dishonest. Ugh. They just can't. They're immune to reason. That's why the world is shit. Is they're just unreasonable, belligerently stupid. You know. I mean, every now and then somebody's smart enough to figure something out. You know, there was obviously somebody who was smart enough to figure out, hey, making this Hoover Dam thing could be hugely big. You know, we'll have huge irrigation. We'll be, you know, we'll be able to grow all kinds of crops. We'll get free electricity. It'll be really great. So now and then, you know, they figure this shit out, but it's only like, I guess, 3 people in the history of mankind that could ever think of a good idea, because everybody else is just a fucking stupid turd that just keeps going, you know, looking for Jehovah under every rock, and in this case, quantum magic. Give me some multiverse.